Welcome to Local SEO Tactics. I'm very excited today. It's probably one of our biggest guests we've ever had. This is a huge get. We're here today with Brad Wetherall. He is an ex-Google director and currently has two agencies. We're going to be talking today about AI. We're going to be talking about my favorite topic, GBPs. And so again, Brad is the owner of Esquire Digital and GBP expert. So let's welcome Brad. And Brad, let's hear what you have to say about AI in the future.
Yeah, no, thanks, mate. It's a pleasure to be here. Appreciate you having me. I know that's a pretty broad intro there. Like, let's hear what you have to say about AI. That's a big intro, And I think I think maybe the first thing to say about that is AI is changing our lives, right? In many ways, and it's in the context of local marketing, and in the context of how we do search optimization. It's really revolutionizing the strategies that we use, because it's there was a presentation at Google I/O in May earlier of this year, where a whole bunch of senior leaders at Google got up on stage. Sundar was there, and there was the VP of Search, whose name is Elizabeth Reed. I actually worked with Liz directly when I was at Google, because she actually used to work on the Google Business Profile and the Reserve with Google products. And so I worked with her quite well. And she was up on stage and she was talking about the future of search. And she used a lot of these kind of like pretty far-reaching statements in terms of like what the future of search is going to look like. And I think the biggest thing that I took away from that was when she got up on stage and said that that Google is moving beyond information to intelligence, and it was that was really startling a little bit for me, and for many people that have worked at Google, and as you mentioned, I'm a former Googler. I ran the Google Business Profile for over a decade as the director of operations. And for any Googler that you speak to, they will be able to tell you Google's mission statement, right? And that is to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. Right? It's kind of a mouthful, right? But like, every Googler will be able to tell you that, right? It's a statement that they kind of drill into you to organize the world's information. And what's interesting about Liz getting up on stage and saying those words, about going from beyond information to intelligence, is that it somewhat changes Google's mission statement. And so it's no longer like Google's thinking about it no longer from the perspective of organizing the world's information and making it accessible. It is now moving into a world where it is creating that information and providing that information directly. It's moving away from this concept of 10 blue links, like the original Google, where it was like, we're gonna find the information for you and we're gonna point you in that right direction. It's no longer a search engine; it's now an answer engine, right? It's providing answers, it's providing information directly, and this is really the impact that AI has had on this industry. Is really now around like, okay, Google's ability to pull this information from various sources of the internet and then create something new out of it and represent that as a direct answer to your question. And I think, like informational intent queries was the first thing that AI was going to be able to influence most heavily. And I think the statistic that I recently saw was that like 88% of informational intent queries, so like we're asking a question, trigger that AI overview directly in search. And what's staggering about that is that whenever the AI overview is triggered and represented on search, the click-through rate of organic search results drops by 70%, right? So like it's staggering on the impact that providing this information directly is having on traditional search engine optimization and the number of clicks that people are getting to their websites. And it's really kind of like creating this phenomenon of zero click searches where, now I think the latest I saw is up to 60% of global Google queries um, result in no one clicking on anything, right? And it's wild how Google is now pivoting from this concept of finding information and then making it universally accessible and useful, right? And linking out to these third parties to now being that answer engine and just providing the information in line. So it's a really crazy time to be in the digital marketing space. I know AI is revolutionizing every different part of aspects of our lives in various ways. Search is no exception to that, and it's certainly something that you have to stay on the edge of in order to make sure that you don't get left behind.
Yeah, I was listening to a podcast from Neil Patel, and he said Google. I mean, he's long on Google. I mean, invest. Well, this is an investment advice, right? But they had their best quarter ever, and so in one sense, it's all changing. But obviously, Google's at the forefront of all of it, and we have to adjust, right? It's our job as marketers to adjust.
Yeah, it's wild, and I think it's I still have a ton of Google stock, right? So like it's great to see that I'm watching the stock go up. That works for me. But it's just I think the investment in and the leaning into this innovation and into the world of AI is really what is the driving force of that confidence that people have in the technology, right? And Google leading the way. And I was still at Google when the Chat GPT really blew up, right? Like an OpenAI really kind of like put themselves on the map. And it wasn't a huge surprise to Google. Google has already they've been working on AI type technology for years, maybe even decades. But like it kind of created this mainstream now of like, okay, people understand it, people can use it, and it really did create a big shakeup internally with the acceleration of the investment required to allow consumers and businesses to leverage this technology. And so now it's rare to have a conversation inside the walls of Google that don't revolve around some type of AI investment. So it's definitely a driving force that I think is actually creating a lot of momentum. And I think Google always has prided itself on leading investments in certain industries and not kind of like becoming stagnant and being resistant to change. And I don't think AI is any exception to that. What's interesting, I think, about what we're seeing in the search industry is that there's a lot of experimentation going on. And I don't know if people see it unless you're looking for it. But like, there's in the speech that Liz Reed gave at I/O, she talked about how AI mode, right, like that new version of search, the conversational generative search experience, is a proving ground, right? It's a way for them to test out new capabilities and see what works, and for capabilities that work well, they will move that into the core search experience, as Liz referred to it. And so I think that's kind of where, if you want to get a preview of what's to come in the core search experience in traditional search, go check out the AI mode, because I think that there's a lot of experimentation happening in that space. And Google relies a lot on consumer feedback and consumer usage in order to inform its decision making. So look, where AI in search is going, I don't know. If anyone tells you they do know, they're probably lying to you, because I don't actually think Google knows where they're going. It's a lot of trial and error, it's putting out a hypothesis, proving that hypothesis, and then leaning into it. And so there's a lot of experimentation happening right now, and yeah, it's crazy to watch it because it's moving so fast.
Yeah, I mean, it's like 1996, as it relates to the internet, right? it has all this potential, and people are throwing money at it, but where it ends up going are two different things. And yeah, I mean, Qasim had some good points, and it sounds, because he's doing his research or whatever, but it sounds like Google Gemini is a different LLM or what have you, in terms of, or AI engine, where it's trying to pull a lot of its information from more of a vetted human source, right? Where most of the others are really pulling it. When you think about the world's biggest database, it's Google, right? I mean, really is, right? And or to some extent, whatever's on Amazon servers, but we can't get at that, right? But everybody can get at Google's, everything Google has, so to speak.
It's wild to see the size of the information pool growing with AI, and how things are adapting. And I think that I saw this one statistic where between Q1 of 2023 and Q1 of 2024, the size of AI generated content on the internet grew 2,800%. Right, and it's just like the size of the internet is just growing at an astronomical rate. And Google is doing its best to try and index all of this data, and so it's kind of not surprising that like Google will see that trend, will watch the exponential growth of data in the internet growing, and then they're going to do something about it, right? So what did they do? In March of 2024, they changed the algorithm. They did a core update to search, and they de-indexed a whole bunch of what they considered to be AI generated spam. And it was an interesting take, because like a lot of businesses would watch their web traffic, and it was cruising along, going up, looking great, and then as soon as March of 2024 hit, it tanked. And everyone's like, what happened? Well, Google changed the rules, right? They changed, and they said, all right, well, all of this content that has been created, it all looks really similar, because it's probably all being generated off of LLMs, whether it be ChatGPT or Gemini or Perplexity or any of these other ones. And it's like it's all the same. It all looks the same. So like there's nothing unique about it. And so Google just de-indexed it all, just got rid of it. And so it's interesting, because I understand the appeal. The appeal is that it's never been easier to create content for your website or for your services. You just go to ChatGPT, you plug in a couple of prompts, and give me 1,000 words on this, and there you go. You just got 1,000 words, plug and play. Unfortunately, that phenomenon didn't last very long, because it's not helpful. It's not unique. Google knows it's not helpful, and then it's not unique, and so it's de-indexing anything that it feels is just kind of like generated content that isn't unique, and is rewarding unique perspectives, right? Like where turns out we can't do without humans after all, right? Like, because that's the unique perspective, that's the value, the interesting ideas, and like a potential take on a topic. It's hard to get AI to generate that. That's where the human intuition and intelligence really comes into play. And so that's kind of where like you may extract from what I said, like, oh, we can't use AI to generate any content for our website anymore, because Google will de-index it, right? And I'm actually not saying that. I still use AI to generate a lot of content for the websites that my agency produces. You just can't do it blindly, right? You have to inject a unique perspective and unique values, and so when you're working with AI to create content for you, you have to work with it, right? It's not you don't drop in a prompt and then call it a day, right? Like you drop in a prompt and then you work with it for 30 to 40 minutes. I like this, I don't like that. Here is my perspective on this, change it, right? And write it from this. So you constantly work with it to make it unique. And then all of a sudden Google's like, all right, I don't mind that it was written by AI if it's answering a question and providing value. And it also, it's been hard for Google to really, like, with the growth of the internet and all these websites now producing, hundreds of pages of content and perspectives. It's hard for Google to know, like, if I'm going to go out to the internet and try and answer a question that someone just put in as a prompt in search, who do I listen to? Right? Like, there's now, an exponential growth of data on a particular topic. And so who is the authority? And so, Google came up with this concept, the acronym of EAT, right? Like the experience, like expertise, I can't remember the other one, experience, expertise, the trust, and what was that? Authoritativeness. Man, I should have had that sucked into memory. I don't know. Maybe it's too late in the day. But yeah, experience, expertise. Uh, right, exactly. So so when we talk about, like, if we break those down, like, how do we generate authoritativeness? How do we show our experience and our expertise? How do we build our trustworthiness? And those are kind of like the key influencing factors in having Google make reference of your data versus everyone else's, right? It's like, why should I trust this Brad Wetherall bloke? Like, how do I know that he's the guy that I should listen to? And so it uses this concept of this neural network to kind of pull information about, like, well, what do I know about, like, who wrote this piece of information? And what do I know about that guy? And so, like, oh, Brad Wetherall wrote it. I can now say, oh, Brad was the former director of the Google Business Profile for 10 years. He's now the COO of Esquire Digital. He leads the GBP expert organization. It's like, all right, this guy probably knows what he's talking about, right? And so it builds that authoritativeness and trustworthiness. And all of a sudden, you may see information that I write now show up in AI, in the AI overview, because Google has more confidence that it's coming from an authoritative source. So that's a very simplified view of how to influence AI. But the premise and what businesses are constantly trying to do is they want to be in that top section of search, right? Because AI is taking up the top of the search results page, right? That's like the very first thing you see on SERP. Like 88% of the time on informational queries, and anywhere from like 40 to 70% of the time for local intent queries. Like the AI overview shows up first. And so, you want to be in that. And how do you get there? It's by tuning a lot of this information, like your website data, your content, how other people are talking about you, like whether that be reviews on your Google business profile, media mentions through other publications. There's all these different strategies, and we've really been pushing the limits with the GBP experts and Esquire Digital, and really trying to see what is the most effective strategy for getting people in the AI overview. And it really does come down to that authoritativeness and trustworthiness, and that voice of brand. So there's quite a lot to unpack there. I think that I could go off in a variety of different directions. So please guide me as to, like, what you think your audience is going to be most interested in hearing.
Well, and we're gonna go into a part 2 here, so everybody needs to stick around to that, because we're really gonna dig into that. I mean, we're gonna cover some stuff here in this episode, but at the end of the day, isn't it really about human validation and edification, in terms of, in your situation, one can kind of, there's connections to all of these things that you've done, right? And we just have to be mindful of that. And so, getting into those tactics of some of those things, we'll probably dig deeper into part 2, if that's okay. And one of the things I want to kind of cover in our remaining time here for the next 10 minutes is kind of just if people can get a bigger understanding possibly, again, we're just speculating where AI is heading. What the theory is Gemini is a more of what's the term I want to use? More of a filtered AI, in that all the others are effectively pulling from Google. And the problem with that is Google's is contaminated with, you guessed it, AI, in a sense that, not that all AI is wrong, but a lot of it has some hallucination or evolution. Let's just call it evolution, right? So these last 2 years, it's been great, but it's kind of been a little bit tainted to some degree. Is the theory in that Google is trying to do Gemini in a way that is super curated and validated. Does that theory kind of ring true with you, or do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, it's certainly true, but as of a point in time, I think that things keep evolving. And I think that if you think of the early stages of Gemini and the foray into the world of creating a large language model, I think that there was a lot of rapid learning and experimentation happening in that space. And it reminds me actually of kind of an interesting story, where I was at Google leading the GVP team, and the one of the product managers who was working on what now was referred to as the AI overview. At the time, it was the Search Generative Experience, or SGE, is what we called it internally. They scheduled a meeting with me, and they wanted to ask, like for this AI overview product that they were building. They wanted to ask what the business's reaction would be to that product. Because that was kind of my role at Google, right? Was to represent businesses on Google. That's really the premise of what the Google Business Profile is your business profile on Google. And so she asked me, like, what are they? How are they going to react? How are they going to react to this? And I told her, I'm like, look, they're going to ask for three things. They're going to say, number one, how do I get in the AI overview? Number two, how do I get out of the AI overview if they don't want to be there? And three, how do I change the information that it says about me, right? Like, the information is wrong. I want to fix it. And she's like, Brad, they're not going to be able to do any of those things. And it's wild, because that's just the nature of AI, right? Like, it's like, we're going to feed AI a whole bunch of data, and it makes up its mind on what is relevant. And so I think that, getting back to your question, in the early days of AI, it was pulling in a lot of information. It hadn't really thought through this concept of the expertise, experience, authority, and trustworthiness type model. And it was like, it didn't really know what data to extract from. And even the model itself was in its infancy, in the fact that it was more prone to hallucination. I think that today we're on, Gemini version 2.5. I think the AI mode and the AI overview run on a version of that, like maybe a proprietary version that has more controls around it. So that implies that if you were to go to Gemini and run a query, you're not going to get the exact same thing as if you go to the search experience, even though it's running on the same underlying LLM model. But I think that it's come a long way. And, there was some people on my team that ended up working for the original version of Gemini. It was called Bard. I don't know if you remember that name. But the original Gemini was Bard. And so they were working on that, and they were basically just tuning it. Was really the best way to explain it, is that they were getting reports in on, like, were these answers helpful or not, and they were really just trying to tune the model to help eliminate hallucinations and make it more valuable. And I think what's crazy about the product as it exists today is that it's just ever evolving, and it's just going to get better and better and better. And it's like the amount of hallucinations is going to reduce. The amount of data that it can trust will increase, which is actually why for businesses out there, now's the time to be investing in AI, right? Like now's the time to make sure, like go into AI mode and do a query on your own business and see what it says about you, right? Because like you want to make sure that it has as much information about your business as possible to actually help, like tune the way that it represents your business. Like going back to that conversation I had with the PM, and they said, how do I change the information that it says about me? And it's like, they're not going to be able to do that. Well, there is a way to do it, but it's not like going into the backend database and changing the what it says. It's about changing the environment and what the world knows about you, and that then influences what AI says about you. So it's a lot harder, as marketers, like we used to be able to get away with doing like a little bit of this and a little bit of that. Nowadays, we have to do everything, right? Because it's all getting sucked in together and all being referenced as one thing in order for AI to make a decision and to come up with a perspective on who you are and what your brand is. So it's I know that's a long answer to a simple question, but I believe that what you said is correct. But I think it's just ever evolving, and I think it's a lot better today than it was a year ago, and it'll be a lot better this time next year than it is today.
So it's just a matter of the mindset of a marathon, right? This isn't a sprint, but it's also a situation where you've got to feed the machine something, right? And I think this is and that's what you feed it. And as business owners, we're all busy, right? It's like, oh, hey, what am I going to feed AI today, right? We don't have time to spit, let alone figure.
I had this conversation with my SEO director earlier this week, and he's like, so we're not really building websites for people anymore. We're building them for AI, right? We're building them for machines. And like, I don't know if I would go that far, right? Because we are still building. I think we're building it for both, right? Like, but I think that you would be remiss if you don't start thinking about it from the perspective that you are also building your website for machines, right? It's not just for people anymore. It's for like, how do you create content that the machines will find interesting, that's easy for them to interpret and understand, so that if Google continues this trend of providing answers instead of results, search results, you want to make sure that you're in those answers and that you're feeding those answers. And so there is a lot of truth to that. I don't think we're quite at the point where users don't visit websites. I think they do. And I think you still need to design websites for people, but you also have to design websites for machines. And I think that's a big pivot that people are starting to make.
Yeah, and I would throw out that we were designing websites for people, right? But we also were designing for Google to optimize it for SEO, obviously. And now we have AI to throw in there, right? And now we've got to do all three. We've somehow got to figure out a way to do that and not break the system, right?
And they're all different, right? Which is crazy, right? Like, I mean, if you were designing for Google search index, then you design around keywords, you design around links, you do backlinking, right? Like, there's all these strategies for designing around influencing the search index. That's not the same as designing for AI, right? Like, designing for AI, it's more about brand mentions. It's more about answering questions, showing expertise. That there's different angles that you have to think about and write from the perspective of in order to influence these different channels. So, and I'm not saying that optimizing for traditional search index is not important, because it still is. It's still very important. You have to do both. You can't just do one or the other, and that's just. That's like I said it earlier in the interview here, where it's like it's an interesting time to be in digital marketing, right? And I'll double down on that, because it's tough, right? It's hard, and but it's also really exciting for the geeks of the world, right? So because I nerd out on it all the time.
Yeah. I tell this stuff to my wife, and she just like walks away. Deal. This is a good place to stop. And before we do, though, I just want to say there should be QR codes all over this YouTube, if you will, on ways to get a hold of Brad. through whether it's through Esquire Digital or through GBP experts. But this next half that we're going to get into here, we're going to talk about really, obviously this is his home, GBP, right? So we're going to talk about GBP expert. I believe we're going to cover how we're going to work with that as it relates to AI and some of the tactics that we think we should go with. Again, nobody here is an expert, but if anybody has an idea where we should head with this, it's going to be Brad. So that ends this part one. Let's jump into part two. If you found this episode valuable, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the notification bell so you never miss any new insights. We've got more expert tips on SEO, AEO, and digital marketing strategies coming your way every week. Want to dive deeper? Check out our other videos right here or grab our free resources in the description below. Thanks again for tuning in, and remember, staying ahead online starts right here.